Welcome, my friends, to another Halloween extravaganza with your host, Mountain Eyes of Mountain Eyes Narrations. I have been recording all day just to make sure you all have a wonderful way to end October. So, get settled in for some delightfully cheesy and spooky tales from the Creepypasta wiki. Be sure to check out the original stories in the description below, and go read some of the work from those with known authors. Stay tuned until after the feature for an exciting update from yours truly. Now, snuggle into those blankets, folks. It's time to begin our frightful Halloween night. Too Early to Trick or Treat. Written by HoodQuest and read from the Creepypasta wiki. I'm in desperate need of help. If anyone reading this could please give me some insight, it would be greatly appreciated. I'm aware that some or most of you may be hardcore horror fans like myself. That's why I'm coming to you with a serious problem. I've always been a fan of horror. I've always enjoyed a good jump scare or a creepy feeling to keep me up. However, what I have been going through for the past 10 years is something I can't understand. I am a 40-year-old man. I'm happily married, and I have 3 children who all go to different universities. Every year, my wife and I would get extremely excited around the fall season. The reason for that is particularly because we both love Halloween. We would always spend a good few grands on decorations and candy. We were known as the go-to house in our neighborhood for scoring a motherload of delicious treats. However, as I mentioned, something strange occurred around 10 years ago. One night, my wife and I were enjoying a little quality time together when we got an unexpected knock at the door. I answered it and was nearly knocked off my feet from the sudden scare. When I opened the door, I was greeted by a large person in a yellow rabbit costume. They looked like a mascot. At close examination, the costume was a little unsettling. The head of the costume contained massive cartoon eyes and ears that were quite too long. The whole costume was pretty impressive. It looked like one of those full-body costumes you couldn't just find in a store. It was like one of those suits you would have to pay a pretty penny for online. The bunny held a small jack-o'-lantern bucket in his hands. He proceeded to hold it forward without saying a word. This is where the problem comes in. This happened in the early part of September. As you could imagine, we didn't have any candy to give this poor fellow. I didn't want to be rude. I thought that this could just have been a confused person. There was no way it was a child. This person was huge. They had to have been at least 6.5 feet. I'm sorry, it's a little bit too early for treats. Why don't you come back in October? We'll definitely have something for you then, I said. The bunny simply looked down in his empty basket, turned his back, and skipped along down the road. Naturally, we found the situation quite bizarre. This wouldn't necessarily be a cry for help if it had ended there. The next time, it was late in December. Snow was practically pelting down on the town. That's when we received a knock at the door. I answered and was greeted by the bunny-suited individual again. The suit looked visibly dirty, as if it hadn't been taken off in who knows how long. The funny thing is, this person never came to my house on October 31st. Not a single time. I tried to be nice again and told the person there was no candy. I also told him he should probably find some shelter from the blizzard. There was no way I was letting him in my house. The next time it happened was in the middle of January. At this point, I was quite frankly getting a little bit irritated and uncomfortable. I even informed the local authorities of this guy. I could legally say he was harassing me and my house. All these years, the police never came up with anything. I let this go for 5 years before we decided to move. One time, I even answered the door with my gun and threatened violence. Apparently, that didn't intimidate him in the slightest. After we moved about 2 miles on the other side of town, we thought it was over. For a few months, nothing happened. Until one day, I got a knock at the door. I didn't think it would be him because everything seemed fine. We didn't have any problems for a while. However, when I answered, it was surely the costumed rabbit person again. His costume was completely filthy. I could see large accumulations of dust and spider webs. I could even see little spiders crawling over his body. It was as if the costume was beginning to rot. No matter how many times I threatened violence or snapped on the guy, he would always come back. This is what I need help with. A few days ago, he came back. I was reluctant to answer the door. It never worked before anyway. This time when I answered, I could see splats of a dried red substance along his mouth and torso. I just wanted this encounter to be over with, so I reached into my pocket and handed him some peppermints. Surprisingly, he shook his head to say no. I have to admit that I'm stupid. For the first time in 10 years, I asked him the question I never thought to ask. What do you want? His body went still for a few seconds. Then, he extended his bucket towards me and gestured for me to look inside. I nearly vomited at the sight. Inside his bucket, there was a heart. For my own conscience, I chose to believe it wasn't a human heart. But I have doubts. In an act of defense, I punched the bunny right in his face. His soft, cotton head went flying into my front lawn. What I saw then has kept me up ever since. Under the mask, there was nothing. There was no person. It was just empty. I looked over in the yard at the discarded head. I swear, for a split second, I saw the head blink. Before I could even process what was happening, the body ran towards the head. It picked up its head and ran at an inhuman speed. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to deal with this. I could honestly use some help. I've gone to the police. I've gone to my kids. Everyone thinks my wife and I are crazy. I am desperate for help. I'm afraid that my life and that of my wife are on the line. Why? Because this morning, something was written on my front door. See you on Halloween for one last time. I'm taking this as a threat. We've already decided that we'll be leaving town for Halloween. I don't know if it will matter. What if it finds us like it did last time? What if it's coming for us? Why is it coming for us? What the hell even is it? If anyone has any solution or answers, please let me know. Halloween is quickly approaching. We're running out of time. And if a big yellow rabbit comes to your door on Halloween, or any time, slam the door in its fucking face.
Little Carver, written by Umbrello and story read from the Creepypasta Wiki. As a child, my favorite part of Halloween was the pumpkin carving. At first, my brother and I would just watch our dad do it, since we were too young to play with knives. But as we got a little older, we were allowed to make our own. I was much better at it than my brother, but he didn't seem to mind. He wasn't into the artistry of it as much as I was. I loved it so much that our dad would take me to the pumpkin fields every few days so I could continue creating my masterpieces. Everyone loved my pumpkins. The neighbors would always say how talented I was to craft such expressive faces. My dad started calling me his little carver. I even started carving pumpkins for people in the neighborhood. Pretty soon, everyone had one of my famous pumpkins on their front stoop. I remember my dad bragging to one of the neighbors that I could probably carve a pumpkin in my sleep. The Halloween after I turned 12, I got the most candy of any previous year. People gave me extra as a way of saying thank you for the pumpkins. There was so much that I gave some to my brother, which I normally wouldn't do. He gave me a big hug and said he loved me, so I smacked him and called him an idiot. We ate so much candy that we went to bed with stomach aches. That night, I had a dream that I went to the pumpkin fields alone. It was dark, and all I could see in every direction were pumpkins of all shapes and sizes. I strolled the rows, searching for the perfect one. A voice from behind me said, "Pick me!" So I turned around to see a huge, magnificent pumpkin. It was almost as big as I was and looked ripe for the carving. A knife appeared in my hand, and I went to work, stabbing and slicing as inspiration took over. When I was finished, it was the greatest creation of my young life. Brimming with pride, I took a step back and admired my achievement with a satisfied smile. The next morning, they rushed my brother to the hospital, but it was too late. A Strange Ambulance. Story written and photo posted by Levi Athens, and story read from the Creepypasta Wiki. It was Halloween night, and my friends and I were driving to a local graveyard at the edge of town. We were too old to trick-or-treat, and too shy to attend any parties. So, we found ourselves piling into my car and heading to a cemetery in the dead of night. It was my crazy idea to spend the eeriest night of the year amongst the dead, and, after much convincing, my friends Buck and Daisy eventually agreed. I wanted to be there as it turned midnight, the witching hour. It said that the veil between our world and the spiritual world is thinnest on Halloween. The night was cold and empty. The stars stood bright and alone in the expansive black sky that seemed to stretch on forever. The old cemetery was worn and overgrown, with thick, tall grass sprouting out from amongst the neglected tombstones. Some of the graves were as old as the 1800s, and Civil War soldiers were even buried there. We parked the car at the foot of the hill and climbed out of the vehicle, armed only with a flashlight. Buck and Daisy had gotten used to me dragging them along on my adventures. This wasn't the first time they'd been forced to pal along with me on one of my strange graveyard trips. They felt especially obligated to go this time, however, being Halloween and all. As I repeatedly told them, it only happens one time a year. The graveyard consisted of dirt pathways climbing an old grass-covered hill, which was quite steep in some sections, hardly the best place to bury the dead. We traversed the rough incline, carefully stepping through the tall grass, avoiding the grave plots masked under a thick layer of foliage. I shined the way with my flashlight as Buck and Daisy followed behind.
"Why do you get the only flashlight?" asked Daisy.
"I told you guys to bring your own lights," I replied.
"We didn't think we'd actually be going through with this."
"Well, whose fault is that?" We made it to the first dirt path and stopped. The headstones gleamed as I shined the flashlight around. We listened carefully, and the night was completely quiet. We felt entirely isolated. No one else seemed to be around for miles. I shut off my flashlight, plunging us into total darkness. With no artificial light anywhere, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was the same as closing your eyes. I clicked back on my flashlight. Moving my flashlight around once more, I caught two shining yellow lights. "What the heck is that?" asked Buck, startled. I took a step closer. From among the grass hopped out a small rabbit with yellow eyeshine illuminated in the light. We breathed a sigh of relief and felt a little silly for being concerned. The rabbit took off further up the hill of the old graveyard, with a tall blade of grass hanging out from its mouth. We were just about to hike up to the next dirt path when we heard it. The sound of a distant siren approaching. My first thought was that it was the police, and that we were about to be told to leave or something. But as we all turned around, we saw the strangest of sights. The red, glowing eyes of an ambulance approaching. With our solitude broken, we stood staring in the direction of the graveyard's entrance. We saw the red light shine through the scraggly branches of the nearby autumn trees, and watched as the ambulance made its way down Cemetery Drive towards us with its loud siren blaring. Something seemed off about the siren, though. It didn't sound the same as a typical emergency vehicle. It was an old siren, slowly whining out a low and lonesome cry. The ambulance pulled up and came to a stop at the bottom of the hill, just behind my car. The siren stopped abruptly. The red lights went out. I looked down at my watch. Midnight on the dot. Buck, Daisy, and I looked at each other, unsure what to do and what to think about this sudden visitor. Why would an ambulance stop at a cemetery? I thought. If this was some town officials trying to get us to leave, it was an odd method of doing so. Each of us waited for the other to say something.
Hello?"
Daisy finally cried out to the bottom of the hill. No response. We could see the vague silhouette of the driver, but nothing else. They just sat there, completely stationary. We thought about walking down the hill to see what they wanted, but something within us told us not to. We stood silently once more. I shined my flashlight down, but the beam couldn't reach the window of the vehicle.
"Who goes there?"
shouted Buck. Still no response. Then suddenly, the driver began beeping the horn loudly. Loud, sharp beeps rang throughout the night. First 2 short, quick beeps, then a loud honk, followed by complete silence.
"What is this, Morse code?"
asked Daisy. As if in reply, the vehicle began honking again in rapid succession. I could see the silhouette of the driver moving and thrashing around frantically while honking the horn. They also appeared to be pounding on their head with their fists and even smashing their face into the steering wheel. The siren and lights turned on, then off, then on again, in a strange, almost musical rhythm. Then, silence.
"What do you want?"
Buck yelled in a louder and more forceful tone than before. The vehicle's door began to open. We instinctively backed up. The door swung open, and out stepped the driver, illuminated by the dull glow of the vehicle's interior cabin light. It was a pale, old woman with long, stringy hair, a scrawny and bony figure wearing only what appeared to be a white gown. There was something almost ghostly about the woman. It was as if she was comprised entirely of papier-mâché, a haunting figure like that of a corpse. Her eyes seemed bloodshot, bruised and tired. They imitated a hollow sadness indescribable. She looked at us as if looking through us. She extended out one of her long, thin arms and curled her old bent fingers on her wrinkled hand. She beckoned for us to come down the hill. We stood unmoved. The thought occurred to me that perhaps this was a spirit who had crossed over for Halloween night. Perhaps this was my exact reason for traveling to the graveyard. I glanced down at my watch. It read 12:06. The timing was so eerie, as if it was the midnight hour that had called her there. These fanciful notions quickly faded, though, as I looked at the horrified faces of my friends. I gazed back at the crone-like figure at the foot of the hill. She beckoned once more, then seemed to grow impatient. She let out a loud, blood-curdling scream that could shatter windows. I covered my hands over my ears and waited for her to stop. In a frantic motion, she quickly turned, jumped back into the cab of the ambulance, and shut the door with a loud thud. The siren roared to life in a bright display of flashing red, and the bizarre ambulance backed up. The vehicle then turned around in the road and sped away along Cemetery Drive.
"Let's get the heck out of here!"
exclaimed Daisy. Terrified, we hurried down the hill to my car with hearts racing.
"That does it,"
announced Buck.
"We are never going on one of your trips again."
At this point, I honestly couldn't blame them. I drove home, as nervous as can be, with my hands shaking all the while. We saw no sign of the ambulance or the lady for the rest of the night. None of us slept a wink or turned off any lights once we got to my house. It wasn't until the next day, November 1st, that we read the news. a woman from a nearby mental hospital had stolen an ambulance and was reportedly seen by locals driving strangely around the town, rhythmically honking the horn and playing the siren in strange patterns. How to Carve a Pumpkin by Austin Dr. and story read from the Creepypasta wiki. I propped the gourd on the table after I laid down the newspapers to keep the juices from running out. I then took a knife and drove it into it. It had a tough rind, but with a few direct strikes, it opened. Unfortunately for me, the juices spilled onto the floor, forcing me to lay down towels. Afterward, I sketched the spots for the eyes and mouth, and I sliced into the gourd. The surface once again proved rough, but I gradually got the hang of it. Juice seeped out from the areas I sketched. Lastly, I made a deep cut on the top. I needed a sharper blade for it. With the gooey residue exposed, I scooped it out thoroughly and placed a candle inside. Now, all that's left to do is get around to carving those pumpkins. My Last Halloween. Written by Locked334 and story read from the Creepypasta wiki. Halloween used to be my favorite holiday. It was the one time of the year you could be anything you wanted to be. You could draw out your darkest desires and display them for the world to see. No one would think you were odd for being the person you always wanted to be. There was no judgment for your choice of attire, and oftentimes you were commended for that choice. At the end of the night, you received a reward for your efforts in the form of a bag full of candy. I am far too old to go door to door begging for treats, but I enjoy watching my children do the same. Weeks in advance, we let them pick their costumes. They are far too young to delve into the ghastly, and usually end up picking a character of a popular movie or TV show. I simply take my pictures and urge them on to each doorway. I always remind them to say, "Trick or treat," before the door opens. It has been this way for a few years now. But I am starting to question the tradition, especially after visiting 113 Forest Road. This past year we made the rounds of our local neighborhood. We made sure only to approach homes that had their porch light on, which was the unspoken rule. Our night had almost come to an end when we reached a home that had been vacant for the last 2 seasons. It was the largest within our neighborhood, towering 2 stories when all the others only had 1 level. It was a large brick Victorian monstrosity that may have once been beautiful, but the landscape had long needed work. It was the house most kids made stories about, and when we saw the dim glow of the yellow bulb, I was unsure of letting my children approach. My oldest begged to ring the doorbell, and my youngest simply wanted more candy. I was outnumbered and relented at their pleas. My wife sat within the idling vehicle, while I followed close behind. The 2 made their way up the steps, and I waited at the bottom. Like always, I reminded them of what to say, My oldest son held his brother's hand and pressed the lighted button. Ringing, much like church bells, echoed from within the house for a moment, before returning to silence. After a few seconds, they turned to me with questioning looks. I had noticed a moving truck parked outside the home earlier in the month, and knew someone must live there, but I had simply not seen them. There was no car in the driveway, and I did not see any lights on inside. I started to think they were simply gone and left the light on in case it was dark by the time they returned. I waved to my children to come back to the car and told them that we would just head home. The look of disappointment on their faces told me they were not ready to end the night just yet. Their faces lit up as the door creaked to life, and a voice beckoned them to wait. "Trick or treat!" they both screamed with excitement. A feeling rolled into me like thunder, and a signal of danger rang in my head. Something was not right. If they were home all this time, where was the car I had seen sitting in the driveway the last few weeks? I instinctively advanced on my two children, taking the steps and leaps. A feeling inside told me they should not go toward that voice, and I called for them to stop as they both turned toward the door. "I choose both." The voice seemed strained, like that of a lifetime smoker. Two ragged hands shot from the parted pathway and drew both of my little boys inside. Their screams echoed in my head. My adrenaline shot me forward, but my body slammed against the closing door. I pounded repeatedly, screaming obscenities of every nature. My body shook violently as my world became a spiral of despair. The whole scene drew the attention of my wife, and she soon was right behind me. In an effort to find the entry, I took a step back, lifted my right foot, and dropped it full force into the hardwood. The door frame shattered, allowing the barrier to fly freely into the darkness. I cried out in terror for my little boys as I rushed through each room. My entire reason for living had been snatched up in an instant, and I had been too late to stop it. When the house had been searched completely with no results, my wife phoned the authorities through wails of agony. We both held each other until sirens lit up our tiny neighborhood. It has been a year now, and we still have no answer as to what happened to our children. My wife distanced herself from me, and I'm sure she blames me for what happened. I don't fault her for that. I blame myself as well. If I had not let them go to that door, or listened to my feelings sooner, they would both still be here. Halloween is no longer a time of fun for us, but a reminder of our mistakes. I don't even leave my house on that night, and even the sight of a pumpkin makes tears stream down my face. The drive home from work is especially hard, witnessing the houses that decorate for the occasion. I am almost in a panic before I close myself within the safety of my home. Please, if you read this, don't let your kids visit 113 Forest Road on Halloween. And that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as last year's. I'm holding off on Glitchette until Tuesday. I'm still going to continue with the Tuesday-Wednesday updates until I get out of training and know what my new work schedule is going to be. Then I'll likely update that. Also, how are you all liking my new channel art? my buddy Sea Urchin threw this together in like 20 minutes. Like a freaking pro she is, and I was beyond amazed. Like, legit. Everything I've seen this girl make is freaking awesome. I don't know how she can throw out a fully colored and shaded pic like that in a few minutes. Me, I'm over here looking like, hang on, I gotta square up the sides of this face over here so it doesn't come out looking like Uncle Fester just hopped into a blender. And by the time I get through a couple of straight lines drawn, she's like, here's a portfolio. So, yeah. But anyway, she threw this together from a joking pose I did when I was trying out a new suit, and I look so freaking demented here. It's got an awesome creepy vibe to it, and I love it, and I just hit my microphone, so I'm sorry about that. I'm not re-recording this part. Anyway, Sea Urchin, she's been doing a lot of AFK Arena, Has Been Hotel, Homestuck, and Undertale AU stuff lately, so she has this really fun blend of everything going on. And she does do commissions, so please go over and check out her work. Links to her DeviantArt and Ko-fi are in the description below, so go check those out and drop a nice comment on something because she's super sweet, super awesome person, and I look forward to working with her again someday. Next, we have some awesome videos coming up shortly that I will be collabing with the Paranoiac on, and I am looking forward to working with him again too, so be on the lookout for those. Also, I finally have my own Reddit and Creepypasta Wicked pages coming out. Wiki pages, not Wicked pages. Oh my goodness, I am screwing up big time here. They're still blank as of right now, but I will be adding my own creepypastas and short horror works over on those. And I will have this listed on both, but for any of you who want to take a stab at reading any of the stories I'll have posted on either of those, you not only have my permission, but my encouragement to do so. All I ask is that you just credit who wrote it and send me a link so I can enjoy it too. And who knows, I may even provide a voice for you if you ask me. So, that being said, feel free to send me stories you want read on here, be they true scary stories or creepypastas, and I'll try to get something set up on Reddit in order for you all to do that. Because, yes, I am doing true horror stories, as well as Reddit posts and anything like that on here as well. I am opening up to doing horror in general, not just creepypastas, because there's so much out there that, you know, is a good spooky story, and I'm willing to do that. Okay, so that out of the way. For those of you that have been asking me to do requests, I cannot find some of these solely from a couple of details. Because some of these, I've heard like a Nurse Joy creepypasta. I don't have a title for that. And if I can't find something from a few details, then I'm not going to read it. So I need a link to a valid site, be it the Creepypasta Wiki or one of its affiliates, Reddit, Tumblr, DeviantArt, WordPress, whatever. But if I don't have the actual story itself to read, then I need something that I can go to and read the story from. So, yeah, help a girl out and actually send me a link to the story itself. And if it's not something that's, you know, one of those legit links, then I'm likely not going to go to it. I'm not going to give myself a virus over something like that. And I'm not going to open up an attachment or anything like that. So you guys have to actually send me either the words or send me an appropriate link. Thank you. I highly appreciate that. Anyway, I will be slowly updating the thumbnails of my videos and the descriptions and everything else. I likely won't touch any of the other old creepypasta videos I've done before the year 2000. When did I get started back on here? 2018. I don't know if I'll mess with those. I may just move them into a little playlist of their own. Well, I have a playlist of their own and then just not touch them from there. Everything else, we shall see. That's all I think I have to cover for you guys tonight. Thank you all so much for tuning in and for your patience for the last couple of weeks. I know that, it's not
always the best idea to take a break from everything, and I know that some of you have been expecting me to do more stories and everything, and I appreciate your patience with this. It's been a bit of a difficult year, so with everything that's been going on, even though I've come through it fairly well compared to some, it's still been difficult at times. So I do appreciate you guys actually, hanging in there, being supportive during the time that I actually needed to take a break, because there's just sometimes I have absolutely no energy. And while I should have prepared for this week a little bit better, I was actually not supposed to start work until November the 1st. But they changed that up and had me come in a week earlier, so I had no time to record anything. And this week I have just been so super tired. So this is the first chance I've really had a chance to do anything. Like, literally, I've been so tired that, like, last night I was doing D&D online and I actually fell asleep at my desk and I didn't realize I had done that. And apparently everybody was, like, yelling at me over the speakers, trying to figure out where I went. And I had no knowledge of any of this because I slept right through it. And until my brother-in-law came down the stairs and yelled really loud. And I sat up in a hurry and I wasn't really paying attention because I'm kind of goofy when I'm asleep. And I bit my lower lip. And I... I actually dozed off, like, I lost count after 3. Last night. I don't even remember what all we were doing last night. I woke up toward the end of it and my little halfling character was still on the roof of a burning house while everybody was, like, the battle was over and everything. I would wake up long enough to take my turn and then go back to sleep. So, like, I was just passing out. It was bad. I mean, the job I have seems like it's going to be a pretty good job, but, when you starting with a new sleep schedule and everything, and when you have another physically intensive job, it gets like that. It's like, you gotta get used to things. So, anyway, that's what was going on. So, I thought I would share that little funny with you guys. And I hope you appreciate that. And me and my goofiness. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. And I will see you in the next video. The next morning, they rushed my brother to the hospital. But it was too late. Wow, I sounded demented during this.